Nossa cobertura de Alan Wake 2 continua e mesmo que às vezes eu no meio das teorias comece a viajar e eu acho que muita gente não tá entendendo o que eu tô falando, porque a história de Alan Wake é complexa, a IGN, junto com o Sun Lake da Remedy, fizeram um vídeo que pode tirar todas as dúvidas, Leptecos.
Eu gosto dessas viagens porque a gente gosta de teorias em si, né? E eu que não tô tão por dentro assim do jogo também fico ainda mais empolgado. Então vamos assistir juntos esse aí, mas antes, Ariel, você está no Como Infinito?
Então, ó, este vídeo faz parte da cobertura da IGN, do IGN First, que eles fazem aqui. Deixa eu só arrumar a tela. Pronto, pode contar aí, Leptecos. Lembrando que esse vídeo ele é narrado pelo Sun Lake, que é o cara que inventou tudo. As loucuras é tudo da cabeça dele, então ele vai explicar as loucuras. Vamos lá.
Bora lá. 3, 2, 1, vai!
Alan Wake.
Tá legendado automaticamente pelo YouTube.
The story of Alan Wake, his American Nightmare DLC, and Ventures into Control is one full of twists and turns through dreams and reality. To help us untangle the tale is Remedy creative director Sam Lake, who has kindly recapped the horror writer's past for us as concisely as possible. Or at least that was the aim.
Okay, let's see where we get. 5 minutes is pretty tight.
Ahead of Alan Wake 2, here is the Alan Wake story so far.
My name is Alan Wake. I'm a writer.
Alan Wake is a New York-based successful writer. He has made his career hugely successful writing these hard-boiled crime books set in New York. But he is not satisfied. He's struggling with his life. He's struggling with his marriage with his wife, Alice, who is a photographer. He just feels that this commercial literature, he's seen all of it. He wants to move and do something more about kind of like from him and more artistic. So he kills off his cash cow, Alex Casey. And then he hits a block and he discovers that he tries to write, he can't. His life is spiraling out of control. He's drinking too much and arguing with his wife. And ultimately, Alice suggests that they should just go away and have a break and kind of have a vacation. It's kind of a last-ditch attempt to fix their marriage. So they go on a vacation to Pacific Northwest, this kind of an idyllic, beautiful, majestic landscape, quirky, idyllic small town setting of Bright Falls.
We need to stop at the local diner to get the cabin key from the landlord, a Mr. Carl Stuckey. He's waiting for us.
And they have rented the cabin. And they arrive. There is some confusion. They don't meet the landlord who is supposed to deliver the keys and directions. Instead, Alan meets this kind of a creepy old lady in a funeral costume, Barbara Chacker, who hands him the keys and directions.
I wish you a good stay in my cabin. I'll come by later to check how you've settled in.
They go to the cabin. They are slightly surprised that it's not what was advertised. It's this, but it's gorgeous. It's this small island on this caldera lake called Cauldron Lake. They settle in. That's when Alice reveals that she's been in talks with a local doctor called Dr. Hartman.
He has a private clinic here. He specializes in helping artists. Maybe
So now you want to get me committed?
No, it's not like that. That's not...
He gets really mad about this. He doesn't want to do anything. He didn't come here to write. He storms out of the cabin, cools off, and then suddenly he hears Alice screaming for help. He rushes in, sees her disappear off the edge of the balcony, feels that she has fallen in, dives after her, everything goes black. He wakes up in a car crash on a forest road at night, confused, starts to find pages of a novel, the title page, like saying that he's the writer. He can't remember writing any of this, but the title of the book, Departure, is what he has been mulling in his mind.
That was the name I planned to use for the next novel I had never gotten started.
These pages
Cara, por que
are
isso não virou
clearly a
série
horror
ainda, mano?
story,
Vamos dar um pause.
talking about this kind of a supernatural.
Vamos dar um pause, porque além da legenda não ter ajudado em alguns aspectos, acho que tem coisas aqui que eu posso ajudar, não que eu seja alguém que possa atravessar o Sun Lake. Para em 3:26, Lê. O Alan...
Se fosse atravessar o Sun Lake.
O Alan, ele tá num momento onde ele tá confuso, ele tem um bloqueio criativo. E ela leva ele pra lá, pra ele meio que falar com um médico, espécie de psiquiatra e tal, pra que
ela
ele possa...
engana ele, né, pelo jeito. Ela fala que é pra eles passarem umas férias, mas ela, tipo, marcou um médico sem consultá-lo. Então, ele ficou bravo por causa disso.
E esse médico, tudo que envolve esse lugar, tem tudo a ver com o gameplay do primeiro também. E ele fica puto porque ele se sente traído porque ela levou ele lá pra ele escrever. E ele queria uma pausa. Ele queria esfriar a cabeça. Ele tinha ideias, que era a novel que começou a surgir na frente dele pedacinhos, mas ele nunca escreveu. E isso surge escrito. Mas isso
foi depois da esposa ter sumido.
Exato, é quando ele entra na loucura, e entra na loucura justamente quando ele mergulha no lago. O lago é uma espécie de portal pro Dark Place, né? Então, e outra coisa que ali na legenda acabou ficando um pouco confuso, é que o Sam Lake fala que ele matou a sua vaca leiteira, que era o Alex Casey, que é o protagonista
principal.
O personagem principal, protagonista dos livros de maior sucesso. O primeiro livro dele foi com ele, né? Mas os livros de maior sucesso do Alan Wake é com Alex Casey, o personagem principal dos livros do Alan. E o Alex Casey é o personagem que tá no Alan Wake 2, que é interpretado pelo próprio Sam Lake, que tá na tela, né?
Então, como se a J.K. Rowling tivesse matado o Harry Potter, por exemplo, no filme X, no livro X, assim. Ele falou, e agora? Ferrou?
Exatamente isso daí. Então ele fica num momento complicado na mente dele e isso talvez até virou uma abertura pro Dark Place.
E cara, eu só queria acrescentar uma coisa, porque assim, a gente vê, e eu vou falar isso muito rápido pra gente poder seguir. Cara, tem tanto filme e série que, tipo, faz sentido ser adaptado? Até faz, mas parece uma história bem interessante. Eu não conheço a história por completo. Essa parte, assim, mais ou menos por você falar bastante, eu já entendi. Pô, cara, parece ser uma história da hora de adaptar, tá ligado?
Uhum. É por isso que os fãs, jogadores de Alan Wake, pedem por tanto tempo pela sequência. Eu sou um deles, e eu joguei há pouco tempo. E o Control trouxe uma pitada, por isso que tá todo mundo no hype também, porque o pessoal que jogou Control entende de Alan Wake. Vamos lá, vamos contar de novo nos 3 e 26, vai.
3, 2, 1, vai.
A horror story talking about this kind of a supernatural force of darkness waking up and starting to take over the locals. All of this starts to come true. He runs into the landlord that they missed. He's covered in shadows, angry, crazy, attacks him. He manages to defend himself with a flashlight. And so light is an active mechanic against forces of darkness. And then kind of getting back to civilization from the forest, he runs into the local sheriff and she is saying that there is no island. There used to be an island on the lake. There is an active volcano under the caldera. There was an earthquake in 1970 and the island sunk in. There is no island.
E aonde estava a casinha que eles ficaram.
So he is confused, he is struggling, trying to piece it together. His agent Barry Wheeler comes to help him.
I don't like it, Al. I don't like any of it. It's not good. In fact, it's the absolute opposite of good.
He keeps finding more pages and this horror becomes like more and more real around them. There seems to be some sort of a force of darkness, the dark presence, trying to get him. He ends up at the clinic, and Dr. Hartman is claiming that Alice drowned, and he is kind of blocking that out and coming up with this fantasy to deal with it, and he should stay at the clinic under his care. But there are other patients there as well. There are these old crazy rockers, Tor and Odin Anderson, who used to have a heavy metal band. They are saying, this is happening for real. This is a special place. Art can kind of like change reality here.
It takes crazy to know crazy.
That's the sanest thing I've heard in a while.
And they give him directions to act upon. He decides to trust them, the crazy guys, instead of this doctor. Escapes, experiences some visions that show him the missing week, diving into the lake and waking up in the crashed car where he's been trapped in the cabin because we find that there is this kind of an opening into a nightmare dimension under Cauldron Lake. He calls it the dark place. It's kind of this nightmare dream reality, and he was trapped there for a week. Barbara Jagger, this old lady who is also the dark presence, made him, holding Alice hostage, made him write this story that would have this fiction come true and release the dark presence and empower the dark presence.
I wrote it. It's my fault.
But he started to understand this because this has happened before, and he was finding evidence that in late 60s, there was this other artist, this poet living at Cauldron Lake, Thomas Zane. His fiancée, Barbara Jacker, they were there and she drowned. Then he started figuring out that this place has power and fiction can change reality, and he wrote her back to life. But because these forces of darkness in the dark place are affecting reality, actually she came back wrong. It was actually the dark presence in her shape. And he realized his mistake. He tried to correct it. He killed her, carved out her heart, and he was an enthusiastic diver. So he tried to kind of rewrite reality to take all of his mistakes out and dove into the lake with her and disappeared.
Conseguiu entender essa parte?
Bem mais ou menos.
I will show you this.
Na década de 60 existiu outro escritor que entendeu que através dos objetos de poder, esses objetos que falam com o Dark Place... parei em 77. Esse outro escritor na década de 60, o Thomas, ele perdeu a mulher, que é essa mulher que falou com Alan. Essa mulher
que é aquela com o véu.
Que
Sim,
é com o véu.
Isso eu entendi. Que ela morreu afogada.
Ela morreu afogada, e daí ele entendeu que através da escrita, das coisas que ele escrevia, o Dark Place, o lugar que tem esse poder de mexer com a realidade, poderia trazer ela de volta. Então ele escreve uma história para trazer ela de volta à vida. Só que ela volta errada, ela volta com uma presença maligna. E aí ele salta no rio, que pelo visto ele não sabia que era o portal.
Ele tenta reescrever, né, pra matar ela de novo.
E os dois saltam no rio e desaparecem, né?
Sim.
Só que ela apareceu pro Alan nessa realidade, nesse ponto atual da história.
Pode crer.
Dá o play aí, conta aí.
3, 2, 1, play.
A light switch, see? Alan Wake's background. As a child, he was afraid to go to sleep. He was seeing a lot of nightmares. Mother had given us kind of a chunk toy and said that this is from your father. It will make the scary things go away. When Alice was afraid of the dark, he gave it to her. And now he finds it as if it had been left behind by Thomas Zane as a gift for him. With fiction coming true, we have this confusion and these open questions like, how did Thomas Zane know about this? Did his writing back in the day affect what Alan Wake is experiencing, change reality around him? Or is it now Alan Wake's writing conjuring up Thomas Zane as a helper for him? We don't know. He gets the clicker. It's a powerful tool against forces of darkness, a light switch.
I can get to her now. I can finish this.
He dives into Cauldron Lake, goes into the dark place, finds the cabin there, faces Barbara Jacker, the dark presence there. She has a hole in her chest because Thomas Zane cut out her heart, shoves the light switch in, flicks the switch, light blooms, and the dark presence is banished. He writes in that cabin, in the dark place, an ending to the story, because there was no ending. It needs to follow certain laws of drama. At least to him it's important that this fiction comes true, and he writes Alice out from the prison that the dark presence trapped her in the dark place. He has to pay a price, so he is stuck in there. And that's where we leave him.
Isso é muito bom, cara. Só que isso é o final do jogo 1, se eu não me engano. Não tem a DLC aí ainda. Você deve contar.
Wake up.
We had downloadable episodes. They show his crazy struggle in the dark place. It goes pretty kind of wild and nightmarish. And we have this idea that because it's really kind of taxing and it's hard not to go crazy, he kind of goes crazy. And we split him apart. So the crazy part is stuck in the cabin, but we are actually playing an aspect of him trying to get to that cabin to kind of fix things. In the end, he does. And he sits down to write a new story to escape.
My name is Alan Wake, and I'm a writer.
Then Alan Wake's American Nightmare came out. Early on in his career, he was screenwriting for this anthology show called Night Springs, which is kind of an anthology show of horror and sci-fi and speculative fiction.
Night Springs.
passa direto nas
He
TVzinhas.
wrote some episodes, and now, desperate in the dark place, he's kind of like trying many different things because he keeps failing. He tries to write fiction that would allow him to escape, change the dark place around him to open up and release him. But it's very tricky. Spoiling the context of how we see American Nightmare is it's one failed attempt in the context of an episode of Night Springs. We bring in Alan Wake's dark double called Mr. Scratch that we already introduced in the main game. He's the villain. He's trying to get to Alice.
Show yourself! Whatever you say, buddy!
Live action.
And we are also kind of building this idea that while he is in the dark place writing, he is seeing some glimpses and visions from our world, from the real world, and using them in his writing, trying to make it more real so that the parts that he adds and changes and nudges would come true more readily. So we have Alice with her photography and her video installation art on a festival in Night Springs. Mr. Scratch seemingly has escaped and is threatening her, and Alan tries to stop Mr. Scratch. We are also bringing in elements of, well, the dark place is really messed up because it's kind of a dream logic reality. There is this kind of a looping that he keeps on going through. In the end, he succeeds in defeating Mr. Scratch. It's left open for interpretation. We see Alice's art, which is this video of their earlier holiday when they were happy, and they are reunited in the form of that projection of that film. And it was kind of left like, is this a happy ending? He is still stuck in there. So it's one example of a story he tries to write to escape, but it's a failed attempt. It's an example of failed attempt, and there's been many through the years.
Are these actual events, or merely a dream, a memory, or a glimpse of what is to come?
Now we come to Control finally, and Control reveal. We have Federal Bureau of Control, which is this secret government agency dealing with weird phenomena in the world, paranatural occurrences, altered world events. And we discovered that they actually came to Bright Falls to investigate after the events of original game. And so they know about it. Then in the downloadable episode called AWE, we have Alan Wake in a bigger role. Once again, the idea being that he is seeing glimpses of the real world, including FBC and FBC investigating. So he's bringing that into the story he's writing, kind of nudging and pulling, trying to have change reality so that FBC, in this case Jesse, the new director, would help him.
Jesse Faden could hear it. A call. It was faint, reaching for her from a dark place.
We also kind of pick up with certain strands that kind of have happened in between. Alice starting to see nightmarish glimpses of Alan as a monster at their home. We obviously understand that, well, that sounds like Mr. Scratch. And she comes in to FBC to talk about this. And meanwhile, we discover that Dr. Hartman, having lost everything, but being obsessed about the lake and the dark place and fiction art used to change reality, goes into the lake and comes out as a taken. So he's turned into a monster. FBC has captured him, brought him to their headquarters to examine him. When Alice comes in to have these interviews about what's happening, somehow Hartman senses that and goes berserk. And then when the hiss comes in, it goes into Hartman, and he already has the force of darkness in him, and this kind of like hybrid merges into something really, really monstrous, which is what Jesse will be facing or faced in AWE DLC. We also find some hints that, well, there is an Alex Casey, an FBI agent called Alex Casey, who is looking for Alan Wake and his disappearance and reaching out to FBC. They're wondering about it. Unfortunately, because there are casualties with Hartman and the whole sector is closed down, a lot of these strands on FBC side are left hanging. We don't know what happens to Alice. Clearly, FBC didn't follow up on that, and it's been years ago, like, we don't know. So these elements are still question marks. How this whole thing ends is that we see on monitors an alert of a new altered world events taking place at Cauldron Lake. They have their monitoring station set up there, and now there is an alarm. There is confusion. There shouldn't be any alarm because this place is closed off, but somehow it's coming from the future.
There might be a glitch. The date's all wrong, a couple of years in the future.
Now we are in that future. And like you will see how that alarm comes to be in Alan Wake 2, and we are picking up the story from there. Definitely what has been going on with Alice and many other things.
É o que vai responder no 2. E a questão aí, ó, isso daí é, pelo que eu entendi, é o final do AWE, que é o DLC.
I'm sorry.
For more on Alan Wake 2, check out our exclusive preview or
de todo modo aí, ele pode fazer um link tão doido que pode levar de novo pro Control. Então a gente tem o Alan Wake 2, que vai mostrar por que teve esse alarme no final do DLC do Control, quem foi que mandou esse alerta e que tipo de atitude eles vão tomar, só que eles estão no passado, né? Então isso daí são regras que só se aplicam a histórias que fazem sentido, porque essa história é muito louca. Então, ó, comentem o que vocês têm a dizer. Espero que quem não tenha jogado Alan Wake e tá curioso pelo 2 possa ter, pelo menos, entendido onde é que a história tá. Mas basicamente é o Alan agora tentando ainda sair da sua loucura, que a princípio não é uma loucura, mas sim ele tá sendo afetado pelo Dark Place. E como que o Control também se encaixa nisso tudo, porque todo mundo tinha curiosidade sobre isso daí, né? O Control é outra vibe, mas se encaixa no Alan Wake do mesmo jeito. Curtiu, Lê?
É isso aí. Curti, cara, tô achando muito legal. Eu inclusive, acho que, cara, isso precisa virar uma série, né? Contada na cronologia que eles quiserem. Porque parece ser muito legal mesmo, parece muitos altos e baixos. Por exemplo, tinha uma hora ali que provavelmente o jogador deve ter pensado, não, eu acho que ele só é doido. Não existe esse Dark Place aí. Aí, de repente, fala, não, peraí, existe sim, cara, ele não tá doido, né? Tem alguém que tá manipulando. Enfim, parece ser um bagulho bem legal, assim.
Não só existe, como parece estar ficando cada vez mais forte, né? E nesse jogo a gente vê nessa explicação a gente vê o Mr. Scratch, que é a contraparte do Alan. Lembram que em um dos vídeos que a gente fez aqui eu falei, o Alan pode estar dividido ainda. Pode ter um Alan do mal, e pelo visto isso é realidade, porque a gente não sabe o que acontece com a esposa dele. A esposa dele também pode estar achando que o Alan que ela tá vendo não é o Alan verdadeiro, enfim. Muitas coisas pra gente poder entender melhor, mas o Alan Wake com certeza vai ser um grande jogo e chega logo aí no mês de outubro. Valeu, um abraço, até o próximo vídeo. Não se esqueça de se inscrever no canal e deixar o like. E de olhar os links de promoções e cupons para vocês que estão na descrição. Valeu!
Valeu!